In the cold, dark reaches of space of the far-flung future, piracy runs rampant, and a journey begins. This week on Schedule for Launch, join me, Zach Walsh, as I speak with Ben Fusilier about his comic, Outlaw Nights. Join security guard Cyrus Lawson as he explores and comes to bearing with the fact that he will not get his quiet life. Going from a security officer to pirate, Cyrus's adventure is just starting. We talk about writing, artists, and tone. Another comic creator. Ben, thank you so much for coming onto the podcast this week.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for that wild pre-show where I just kind of just talked a little bit too much for a while. It's been a day.
I know that feeling.
But that's not the important part. We're here to learn about you and your comic Outlaw Nights, which is really cool. I love the art style. The little bit of information that I do know about it, I'm very excited about.
Oh, hell yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah, unfortunately, I'm just the writer, so, I can't take credit for how awesome it looks, but, I'm quite pleased with the results.
We're going to get into that in a little bit. Ben, before we really get started on Outlaw Nights, though, can you please tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Well, let's see. I am a writer, screenwriter, comic writer from New Orleans.
Okay.
My background is mostly in film, but a couple of years ago I decided to delve into indie comics. Number one, because I started paying attention to a lot of YouTube shows that were talking about comics and promoting indie comics, and I noticed that there just seemed to be a major boom going on with independent comic production. And on checking it out and thinking about it, I recognized that it's a lot more cost effective to produce a comic than it is to try to produce a full-on movie, especially since most of my ideas are very high concept. So it was and Outlaw Nights was a story that I had just kind of been playing around with for at least 10 years.
Wow.
And it was something that I was just kind of keeping in the back of my head, where I'm I'm going to try to make this a big old movie someday. And as I was getting older, I was just starting to get more realistic about it. And
yeah,
I decided to give it a shot, converting it into a comic, and I found that it actually works better as a comic. So everything just kind of clicked into place. And I was really happy that with our first campaign, because we managed to get what we were looking for in funding, and I managed to produce the book, got it out to a bunch of people. It was a nice success, so I'm ready for part 2.
I'm very excited to learn more about part 1 and part 2. Something that I picked up there is that you said you're also a screenwriter.
Yep.
How'd you get involved in just writing in general, though?
Basically, since I was a kid, I've always had way too big of an imagination. I just love escapism and the concept of world building. It's always just been with me, especially since when I was about a preteen, I really started getting into RPG video games.
Oh man, same.
Particularly the Final Fantasy series is probably my favorite video game series of all time. And so just with all of that, it just kept I just kept imagining and kept doing, going off into my own little worlds. And somewhere along the line, I just kind of figured I should, that should be my career, is creating. That's what I'm passionate about. That's what I enjoy doing the most. And it's you gotta follow what you're passionate about. Otherwise, you're not really living.
Yeah, 100% agree with that. I think that in recent years, a lot of people got to expose themselves to more passions. So I'm glad to hear that you're kind of deep diving into that and exploring other options other than just screenwriting. Something that I'm curious to know about is, do you think that your love of world building and these big expansive universes, you said you're high concept as well, do you think that
Yeah.
that kind of was influenced by that media that you consumed when you were younger? Like, I don't know how many of
Oh,
the listeners out there have played a Final Fantasy game, but they're big. They're always very big.
oh yeah, no, 100%. Like most of my ideas, it's like they involve combinations of elements of things that I've seen.
Hmm.
And it's just like me kind of picking and choosing elements of stories that I love. Where it's like, okay, I thought this worked really well, but this didn't work. So I'd like to take this, but I'd like change it up here and there, and I'd refocus it this way. You know what I'm talking about? It's like,
Yeah.
because ultimately, like I find like that's what really creation is these days. It's you take your influences and you kind of refashion it in your own way.
Hmm. There's this thing in game design where creators will take bits and pieces of other games that they like, and the term that's used is either hacking or kit bashing. And I think that that is a huge part of writing too.
Most definitely. Because I mean, there's nothing new under the sun, especially like storytelling wise. It's just people taking things that they love and kind of combining elements and rearranging things, and then ultimately
Hmm.
telling it from their own perspective or worldview.
Old stories, new flavors.
Exactly.
And speaking of new flavors, we have Outlaw Nights. What is Outlaw Nights?
So Outlaw Nights is an action adventure, suspense, thriller.
Mhm.
Very very high on action, but it's also a very much I would categorize it as a space opera, not really a
Yeah.
sci-fi. But it takes place in the 31st century. Humanity has begun colonizing onto other planets, and in essence, history is very much repeating itself as the nations of Earth are all at each other's throats, competing over territory and resources.
Hmm.
And so it's very much a mirror to what happened with like the discovery of the New World back in the
Mm.
day, where it's everything is competition. It's manifest destiny brought back, but on a much more epic scale. And in the midst of all this, there has been a new boom in sort of a golden age of piracy because even though technology has improved to where Big Brother is very much uh, in play, it's too stretched thin to be able to cover everything going on in the outer territories. So essentially, criminal behavior has become far more. You can get away with a lot more.
Hmm.
So it's a very chaotic time period, and in the midst of all of that is our main character Cyrus Lawson, who is basically he's a refugee because his home country of the United States was destroyed about I think about 10 years prior to the story, and so he's kind of
Okay.
bounced around a bit, and he has settled into a far away, out of the way, I would say strategically useless colony called Therese.
Hmm.
And he's kind of, he's very naive and he's got this kind of small town hero complex where he wants to live a relatively peaceful life, but at the same time, he
Yeah.
wants to engage in some heroics. So he's joined the colony guard of Therese, but he's not, he wasn't anticipating a hell of a lot from it. But uh, pretty much right from the outset of issue number one, his dream is ripped right from under him, as the colony is invaded by a ship of pirates, and the ship is called Hazard. And these pirates are looking for a special piece of data that is going to lead to something much later on in the series here. It's gonna be turning everything on its head. That's the best I can. That's the most specific I can be about that. But so without giving issue 1 away too much, like push comes to shove, Cyrus ends up kidnapped by these pirates. And so beginning in issue 2, Cyrus has to learn how to survive in the underworld of the 31st century, while at the same time redefining his very black and white sense of morality.
So you have this fish out of water story on a very large scale.
Absolutely. And Cyrus in many ways is kind of, the audience's window into this new underworld.
Something that you can kind of understand. He's coming from a place that, from my understanding, should have been relatively safe.
Yes.
To a place that was probably even safer. And then that kind of just like disappears really fast.
Yep. Exactly. And also it's very much him growing as a person, because like I just said, like he's got a very rigid sense of morality, which I would say kind of reflects the way I used to look at the world when I was a lot younger.
Yeah.
And that, it's like reality is sort of going to be putting him to the test.
No, that's totally fair. I always find that the most compelling characters have pieces of the author in them, because there's this sense of authenticity to the character. So to hear that, obviously I shouldn't make assumptions, but I'm guessing that you weren't kidnapped by pirates and learned to be a better person.
Unfortunately, no.
Or maybe fortunately there. So something that I really wanted to know, though, was what drew you to the space opera action scene? Like that, what drew you to that spot specifically over something like sci-fi or thriller, maybe even a suspense comic?
A lot of it was just my influences growing up. I really enjoyed specific animes growing up. Like, I was never big into anime, but there were some that I just really loved. Like, a couple of them being things like, I know, like, Tenchi Muyo had a little bit of stuff in it about space piracy, but it was very minimal. But what little stuff there was in there, I really loved. I really enjoyed Outlaw Star, which I know that sounds very
great.
I know that sounds very similar to Outlaw Nights, but that is not where I pulled the name from, I promise you. Yeah, like I really loved the setup in that story, but at the same time there was a lot of things I would have changed about that story. And I really, I think I first came up with the idea for Outlaw Nights right after I saw the first Pirates of the Caribbean movie.
Really?
Yeah, because I loved the Pirates movie. Like, I loved the aesthetics. I loved the way the story was set up. But I was thinking in terms of I love that romanticism behind piracy, but I wanted to do it in a way where it was like you could have more room to play. And I felt like, when you do something in a futuristic setting, you give so many other options for technology, or and in dealing with space, you're not limited by things like geography. Because it's the big reason why the golden age of piracy eventually ended was because people started charting out all the empty spots on the map. It was we figured out pretty quickly how big the Americas were, and Law and Order were able to get more of a foothold, and so it was there was less room for people to hide out away from civilization. But when you're dealing with something like space, like that's an endless ocean.
Yeah.
Like you're not going to be able to chart all of that. Even if you are in something like a Star Trek. But
You had mentioned earlier that Cyrus is kind of put into this refugee state by the destruction of the United States of America. And
Yep.
obviously, the USA is way bigger in the 31st century, but that's a pretty strong opening swing.
Yeah.
What kind of led you to that? Because that's, to me, like, it's really bold and not in a bad way. I'm not saying like that negatively at all. I want to state that. It's just like okay, the stakes are already pretty high.
Yeah, it was a lot of different factors. I think part of it was my own I guess my own bleak outlook on certain things, but it was also uh but it was also just due to, like, usually in a lot of these stories, America is always kind of presented as being like the big strong country.
Hero, yeah.
Yeah, and it's like you got refugees from other countries that have to deal with acclimating to America and all, and I just kind of thought it'd be kind of fun to play around with a reversal of that, where it's like, okay, instead of America being the one that brings in the refugees, have it be the reverse. It's like Americans are now having to acclimate to other cultures. And so, like, I kind of liked that concept, and I just thought it would be kind of a fun thing to play with in a futuristic setting.
I'm sure it does look a little bit different too when we're talking refugees from a planet to another planet too. So
Yeah, and plus, I mean, one of the things that's going to come up a little later on in the series is the idea that, like, the colonies on the planets are themselves developing autonomous cultures from their parent countries, and that's leading to a lot of conflict with the inland, as I call it, which is Earth.
okay.
And so, you got certain colonies that are vying for independence. You got certain colonies that are kind of a hodgepodge of different cultures. So there's a lot of variety going on.
I think that like kind of really fits the space opera theme too, because if you look at something like Star Wars, one of the big, I mean, there are people out there who can name just about everything about that, but
Yeah.
the planets are so distinct from one another that it's like, oh, this scene happened here, and you know that the rest of the planet probably doesn't look like that, but that's what you know about it, and it kind of just encompasses the entire setting there. So having these autonomous planets kind of helps build out that world and universe building that you talked about earlier.
Oh, most definitely, yeah. Like, I haven't completely planned out everything that's going to happen in the series, but, like, I have a very good idea of things that I want to do, and I ultimately know where I'm going to end up with the series. Like, because that's the most important thing, is you want to know what your goal is, where you're heading to in the writing. But there's just a lot of fun. There's just a lot of fun things that I want to play with.
We had talked about fun and exciting elements to play with prior to the actual interview started, and one of those was both of our love for space pirates.
Yep.
Obviously, Pirates of the Caribbean, huge inspiration for you. Is this kind of like a unified front? Is somebody like Hazard like an opportunist? Obviously, they're planning with this data spot specifically, but or is it like a whole hierarchy, kind of like reflections of our world at history?
It's a very much kind of a rat race.
Okay.
because Hazard has like, they've been tipped off about this data, because ultimately it's about with the Captain Ivory. He's got a big plan of what he's going to do with this quote unquote treasure that they're looking for. But of course, Hazard is not the only ship that has heard of this, and so there's going to be some competition coming down the line, because there are different groups of pirates that are all willing to cut throats to get ahead. And actually, we're in issue 2. We're going to get a brief little teaser of one of those competing pirate groups.
I always love seeing that competition between these either villains or morally gray groups, because I mean, I don't know about you, Ben, but I personally love, even if it's super overdone, but I love the anti-hero / villain tropes where it's like these opportunistic hunters. Like, I love that.
Oh, definitely. And I can tell you that, like, the heart of this particular arc in the Outlaw Knights saga, as I'd put it, it very much centers on the relationship between Cyrus and the Captain of Hazard, Ivory. Because in many ways, I got a little bit of a reflection there from Treasure Island.
Oh, yeah.
The relationship between Jim Hawking and Long John Silver.
Yeah.
Because there's that dynamic of you got Cyrus, who's very much, he's all about the good, like the pure good, and you've got Ivory, who's, I would categorize as more of a chaotic neutral. But, he's not a bad guy.
No.
He's just not. And I mean, compared to most other pirates, he's actually pretty lenient, but he's still like, you don't want to screw him over.
Yeah. At the end of the day, he is Cyrus's character fold and mentor to this new world.
Yes. Very much so.
Those are always fun characters to play with.
Oh yeah, I can tell you, like, Ivory's actually my favorite character, so.
Writing and creating characters can be super tricky at times, and one of the advantages I think comics have over a lot of other mediums is the ability to stylize and show what their characters look like in a drawn format. You've got a new team of artists for issue 2. You have Juanito oh my gosh, I'm sorry everybody, I'm going to butcher some names right now.
Oh no,
Juanito,
that's cool.
Arcorius, is that right? No, it's not.
Yeah. But... Well, I mean, he
close. Juanito. You have Juanito. You have of Aerith Saga. You have Jay Krager of Hammer, a post Ragnarok tale, and Bruce Patinoid. Maybe. Oh, guys, I'm sorry. I'll apologize to you later. Of the Wreck, and they've got some really cool art that's being used for issue 2.
Basically, well, what happened was Bruce was actually my original interior artist, but I just kind of found that, like, he has a really good style. It's just, I found that it just wasn't a very good fit for this particular one. So, I mostly was just using some of the pages he did for our promotional work there. And Juanito was actually going to be my interior artist next, but he ended up being backlogged with a lot of other projects, so he wasn't able to really commit to anything. So I'm definitely going to be featuring his work in the book. It's just it's not going to be the actual story pages. It's going to be like additional
splash
artwork.
pages.
And so Jay Krager is actually going to be doing the interiors, and so far we've done about 4 pages. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to do more just yet because I'm in between jobs looking for a new
Yeah.
job. So money's tight right now, and I like to pay my artists, right when they get the pages done. Like I don't like to
Yep.
put things off. So I just kind
Hmm.
of have him on hold at the moment. But I really love his work in
It's so
particular.
good.
Yeah, like um, on the email sign up page, Jay Krager's the one who did that cover that has my boy Wellington with all that electricity around him.
Yes, that's like one of my favorite pieces.
Yeah, that's gonna be the cover.
It's so good.
Yeah, Wellington is technically the villain of this issue, and he's a British soldier and particularly specializes in hunting pirates.
Yeah, he looks like he can rip you in half with his bare hands.
Oh,
So.
I know. Like, I think what really sold me on Jay Krager was when he did that page. Like, it was that psychotic look he gave Wellington. I was just like,
Yeah,
yes, that's it. Like, that's the one.
it's like I think that the best like feeling I can give is like this is like 90 like late 80s early 90s feeling comic, which to me is like one of my favorite styles. It's where it's like,
Most definitely.
yeah, oh, just like the lighting's super good and like the shapes, and everybody's just got such like dynamic poses going on here. I love it. It's so good.
Oh hell yeah! And as you've probably noticed from a lot of the artwork, everybody works out in space.
Oh yeah, muscles on muscles. But what I was getting at was like, what goes into you communicating with an artist on like getting the right look for a character, or do you give them pretty like a pretty free reign?
It's actually kind of 50-50 because what it is there's certain characters where it's like I'm very specific about what I want. Like with Ivory in particular, like I was very specific about him. I was very specific about Serpent and all the main characters. Like I had very specific ideas,
Mm-hmm.
and for a lot of the side characters, I left them kind of vague. Like I kind of, I would explain like, okay, I'll maybe this color hair, uh, this style of clothing, but not specifically what they're wearing.
Yeah, their
And
job more so.
I'd let the artists kind of play around with some of those characters, and the backgrounds, particularly, are very much the artists' creative work because I'm not good at scenery description. Yeah.
That's that, but that's fine though. Like you're a writer in like that sense, and when you're trying to build out something that we really don't have a proper image of yet, like we have pieces of media that fall through there, but when we're trying to create something unique, like people know the tropes of space opera. You could ask anybody what Star Wars is, and they have at least a vague idea of what they're
Oh
thinking
yeah.
about.
Yeah, I think the thing that makes Star Wars so like lovable for people, like particularly with the originals, not with the
Hmm.
prequels or anything, but with the originals, what everybody loves and what was something that I kind of wanted to be incorporated into Outlaw Nights is that whole thing about uh, unlike most space stories in general, Star Wars was specifically designed to where like the scenery and everything looks very aged. Everything
Yeah.
looks really well lived in. And it's like it gives you that sense that like okay, this has been around
Hmm.
for a while. Like there's a culture here. There's something ingrained here where it's like you got something like Star Trek where it's like everything looks new. It looks
Bleeding
like it was
white, yeah.
yeah, it looks like everything was built last week. Like
Exactly, yeah. I actually had a conversation with a game designer half a year or so ago about that specific topic in their game, which was also space opera themed. And he stressed with his artist making sure everything looked like it had a layer of dirt on it.
Yes.
Like your pirates, Hazard, their ship, that's their home. Like that's where they live.
Oh yeah. In fact, yeah, like they show part of the interior of Hazard in the first issue, um, particularly the cockpit, and I mean it
Mm-hmm.
was really well done. But at the same time, like a part of me kind of wished I could go back and like I really wanted to add in a couple of little details that we never really had time for. Like I would
Yeah,
have loved to add in something like a stereo or something, you know, or like
yeah,
maybe
just
even
some
like
little things.
drinks, you know. Well, I mean, actually, Ivory does have a drink in that scene because
Yeah.
Ivory's an alcoholic, and
Oh,
so
well, there you go.
he's always slamming them back, and that's why and that's also why he's got a pilot working for him, even though he can pilot. It's because he's usually drunk.
No, but that's some good world building right there. Also shows he's responsible. So this is going to go to Indiegogo, which is one of the other backing sites that people have started to use as they've moved away from Kickstarter. Was the first issue backed through Indiegogo too?
Yes.
Okay. Could you tell me a little bit about your experience with Indiegogo? A lot of the people who come through and listen to these episodes are either trying to like learn a little bit about the different backing sites because we have some creators who come on, and like obviously there's a lot of announcements a couple months ago about Kickstarter and some choices they've decided to make. So they're looking for options. What are some things that you like about Indiegogo?
Um, I really enjoy how they really don't. There's not a hell of a lot of what I would call like vetting, where it's like they don't have specific rules that you have to adhere to necessarily. Like, I mean, they have some rules obviously, but I
Yeah.
mean, there's way more, I guess, creative freedom with Indiegogo,
Hmm.
and they really just let you do your thing. You know, they do take a small percentage of what you make, but I think that's pretty reasonable
Yeah.
considering everything. I think the only downside I would give to Indiegogo is just that if you need to contact them, I think they pretty much kind of run on sort of an automated basis when it comes to interaction with people uh, hosting campaigns. Like, if you have a problem and you email them, like it's going to take them a little while to get back to you, and
Yeah.
usually you'll get like a computer generated response.
Mm.
So yeah, like that's the only downside that I would give to Indiegogo. Like everything else is very good.
I mean, that's always good to hear. Like, not the the automated response part, that kind of sucks. But like the fact that for the most part it's a really good, and I'm guessing it's not overly difficult to get set up and stuff.
Oh, not at all.
Well, that's good to hear. I know very little about the actual backing process. So just hearing that it is a place where creators can go and kind of get started without too much of a hassle is always a positive.
Definitely, yeah. Because around the time I launched my campaign, um, I had been looking around and like I had been hearing about how like Kickstarter was doing things where like, you know, it was like they were very much obsessed with I guess controlling certain types of content. Where
Yeah.
it's like if you had a campaign that had like let's say like if you were doing a comic where there was a lot of women with like cleavage showing or something, they would like vet
Hmm.
you, you know, they'd be like,
Yeah, they put it on freeze. And those things kind of come up. I'm not actually sure which country Kickstarter is based out of either, though. So I guess it kind of gets a little murky when you're starting to go into international waters.
yeah, most definitely.
The other part, though, that I wanted to ask you a little bit about was the actual campaign for issue 2 of Outlaw Knights, Genesis of a Renegade, I believe is the name of this issue.
Oh yeah, it was the name of the first issue also. It's just, this is sort
Oh,
of Genesis of a Renegade Part 2.
oh, okay, that's the storyline. Perfect, okay. So, this is going to hit Indiegogo at this point in time as we're talking. Like you said, you're in between work, so it's kind of on hold, but we're getting the word out there and people can start to look into it. What are some of the things you're hoping to add to the campaign?
Um, well, I keep most of my I kept my last campaign pretty simple.
Hmm.
Because the number one thing, like I notice a lot of my fellow crowdfunders do, like, a lot of us, we network.
Yeah.
We all kind of go on each other's streams and we all talk about things, and I've gotten a lot of great advice. But the number one thing I've always noticed with a lot of these campaigns is that they promise a lot of extras. And the
Hmm.
biggest problem with that is that that takes up much more time and money. So a lot of times people end up having to push their delivery dates back and have to, and they have like a bunch of other complications that they have to juggle. So with my story, especially since Outlaw Knights has just started as a story, I'm kind of saving the extras for a little more down the line.
Hmm.
That being said, I am gonna add in like a couple of special tiers of like get a book with like a poster, get 2 books with like a poster, that kind of thing. And I'm
Yeah.
definitely gonna be offering issue 1 once again on this
Hmm.
campaign. And I'm thinking about this, though I'm not sure if it'll work. But I was thinking about doing like a special tier where you get both issues combined into one book.
Oh, that'd be very cool. Like a volume. We talked about that earlier.
Kind of a volume, like it would only be about 50 pages. So I mean,
Yeah.
I don't know if that constitutes a volume. Um,
I'm not totally sure.
because what it is like originally, issue 2 right now was originally part of issue number 1. Like they were
Yes.
originally one script, and I ended up having to cut it in half to make everything more feasible.
Hmm.
And I hated having to cut it in half, but I did it reluctantly.
Yeah.
So this would sort of be like my way of kind of getting that wish, but I don't know if it'll work out logistically or not. I need to ask a couple of people about it.
Hmm.
But there's definitely going to be some deals of getting both issues again. And actually, this is a very limited tier idea that I have, but essentially everybody on the email list is going to have access to a couple of secret tiers that aren't going to be available on the main campaign. And one of them is that I have about 3 issues of issue number 1 left over, so three people who jump on it real quick are gonna have the chance to get 2 for the price of 1.
Okay.
So you'll get both issues for the price of just one comic.
That is significant, especially with the paper shortage and everything. Like, totally understandable. I know that you already have them, but the current paper shortage that the world's going through has really increased the price of physical books.
Yeah,
Oh, right. We totally
lordy.
forgot to mention that this is also available digitally. Like, that's. We don't
Yes,
want you out there listening and thinking that you need to get the physical copy. If you prefer to listen digitally, Ben has told me that it is available digitally as well.
absolutely. And issues 1 and 2.
So, Ben, we're actually starting to kind of run low on time here with stuff. We've kind of gone for a bit now, and I talked a little too much before we hit record.
Oh, no worries.
Yeah, but I have to me, a really important question for every creator who comes onto this show has answered it at least once, and that is, what advice can you give to a new creator who's looking to maybe start their own project or write their own comic, but they don't really know where to start?
Well, I would say number one, learn the format. In terms of like if this is like your first time writing a comic or a screenplay, like learn the format of how to do it. It's relatively easy to do so because I was using a program called Final Draft, which you may have heard of.
Yes.
Yeah, when you choose the template on is this a screenplay or is this a comic script? If you choose comic script, they give you the format like right there. Like they give you everything you need to know. Like it's already set up for you. So that it won't take you long at all to learn that. And you just got to kind of wrap your mind around it. But also, I would say network. Like that's the biggest thing that's helped me out is get with other creators online, get with like streamers and stuff. They can point you in the right direction on anything. That's the way I basically learned how to do what I'm doing is just I listened to what other people had done. I took advice from them whenever they gave me like critiques. And yeah, just try to figure out who your product is for, like who your audience is, and go from there.
I think that's excellent advice because once you know who your audience is, you can really start to narrow in on what kind of content you want to create as well.
Yeah, most definitely.
Ben, this has been an incredible talk, and I've learned a lot about Outlaw Nights, and I'm really excited to see more of it as it comes out. Where can people find out more about you and Outlaw Nights?
Well, I am on Twitter. You can find me at Knights Outlaw, and that's with an N, not a K. But you can also check out the email list on Indiegogo itself. Outlaw Nights: Genesis of a Renegade Part 2. Sign up for the email list because I'm not going to schedule the launch to this thing till I have at least 100 people on the email list, and we're up to about 81 so far.
Oh,
so
wow.
We're in the right direction. It's just we got to get there. So sign up for that email list. Also, you can find me on Instagram at Outlaw Nights. It's pretty simple. And you can also find me on YouTube, which is on my channel called Fusebox.
All right. As always, audience, those links are going to be down in the description below. Ben, once again, thank you so much for joining me this week on the podcast to talk about Outlaw Nights. I had a great time.
Oh, thank you, man. I appreciate the hell out of it.
No problem at all. And audience, thank you so much for listening. Ben and Outlaw Nights, Genesis of a Renegade Issue 2, they're scheduled to launch real soon. So keep an ear out. Go sign up for the email feed and get in on this project before it's passed and you gotta pay a bigger fee to get a hold of it, because that's the best part about crowdsourcing something is the lower pay to get what you want.
Yep.
But until then, take care of yourselves, have a good night, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye. Thank you so much to Ben for joining me here on the podcast this week. Outlaw Nights is this incredible late 80s, early 90s space opera feel, and I really think fans of Star Wars and Stargate and shows of that type will be really into it. It's got this intense layer of detail, and issue 2's looking like it's going to be really outstanding. Go follow Ben on his socials and get notified on launch for when this project goes live. And thank you for listening, audience. I said last week that we might hit 1,600 listeners total, and now we're really close to being at 1,700 listens, so y'all turned out in a very hard way. If you don't follow on Twitter, I also wanted to quickly update you and let you know that Scheduled for Launch is now available on Stitcher. I personally never heard of it before until like 2 days ago, but I had a couple of people ask about it and ask me to bring it there, and I wasn't sure. Well, it's on there now as of today, so please go check it out. If you use Stitcher, let me know how it sounds, because I'm super unfamiliar with it. If you like the show and you want to hear more though, why not tell somebody about us? Word of mouth is the only way that I get around with this one, because money, I can't afford to promote the show any other way. So I gotta thank all of you for the wonderful things that you say about the show and bringing me on to all this cool stuff and getting to do things like charity streams and that. It's been a lot of fun. Next week, though, I'm going to be joined by Steve D of Tin Star Games to go over his catalog of work. I hope to see you there. Until then, though, take care of yourselves. I'll see you on the next one. Bye.